Imagine being born during a time when just 4 short years earlier, your birth would have been considered a crime. Picture 1967. It's the year the very first Super Bowl was played between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Green Bay Packers. The cost of a movie ticket was about $1.35 and a gallon of gas was about 25 cents. Americans were still getting used to not having white versus colored bathrooms and drinking fountains. During the same year, there's this amazing married couple who'd been fighting for their marriage for 10 long years. Their love and courage took them all the way to prison because it was illegal for them to be married. They went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court just so their marriage could be considered legal. The reason? They simply looked different than one another. He was a white man. She was a black woman. That's it. Interesting enough, their last name was Loving. So now, with all that in mind, I want you to think about your typical white middle-class family in the early 70s. Not quite happy days, definitely not Leave It to Beaver. The 17-year-old girl, she meets the love of her life. They begin to go steady. About a year later, they become pregnant, they get married in that order, and about 9 days before her 19th birthday, she gives birth to a beautiful baby girl. I want you to picture yourself being that baby, and the color of your skin is what tore your mother's family apart. You see, that baby was me. My mother's brother, who some would call my uncle, has not spoken to my mother since the day I was born. My mother's family was split simply because she chose to love a man who looked different than her. Similar to the Lovings, but he was a black man. She was a white woman. That's it. Now, if you were to look at my birth certificate, you would see that my father's race was listed as Negro, and my mother's race was listed as Caucasian. Interesting enough, there was no race listed for me. They each had a group to which they fit. Yet me, I was nothing. As I grew up, people would tell me to follow the one-drop rule. According to Harvard researchers, the one-drop rule means that if you're a biracial person, you are not considered in 2 racial groups in which you belong. But it goes deeper than that. The one-drop rule means that if you have any non-white blood, then you are not white, and you may only identify as that non-white race group. So for me, I would only be black, even though my DNA from Ancestry.com says that I'm 36% African and 64% European. Those same Harvard researchers found that in 1985, there was a woman who was denied to place white on her passport because she had one identifiable black ancestor who was her great-great-great-great-grandmother. That's 4 grades. That's 6 generations back and 1.5% of her DNA. That's the one-drop rule. All right, let's do an exercise. I want everyone to think back. Think back to when you were a child. What was your favorite food? What did springtime smell like? What did you enjoy doing most? And with all that you remember about your childhood, add to that always being asked, what are you? What are you playing? What nationality are you? You're likely confused because you just want to play, but you're always being asked to talk about race and color, when you'd more rather just be able to slide down a slide or play tetherball. That wasn't imagination for me. That was and has been my reality. It kind of makes sense that I would grow up and study the psyche of people. There was a CNN report called Kids on Race, The Hidden Picture, and there they found that white children believed that their parents would disapprove if they brought home a friend of a different race. Yet there was a study from the Journal of Research of Childhood Education that says when children have interracial friendships, they have high levels of social confidence and self-esteem. So why is it that we're so resistant to those who don't look like us? As a clinical psychologist and a person with an MBA with an emphasis in global management, what I have learned is that it's human nature for us to focus on homogeneous groups of people. In other words, it simply means that we just like people who look like us. There was a study in 2011. It was called Birds of a Feather Sit Together. Physical similarity predicts seating choice. What the researchers found was that when people sit in an audience, they tend to sit next to those who look like them. The researchers also found that we believe when we share physical similarities with somebody, we believe that we're going to be accepted by them, that we share the same types of attitudes, and that they'll like us more. So while sitting in an audience next to someone who looks like you doesn't seem like a big deal on a macro level, on a big level, it can cause segregation, which then promotes prejudices and misunderstandings. So while simply sitting next to those who look like us, it limits getting to know those who are different than us. And here lies the problem. In social psychology, this is called in-group versus out-group. The in-group is the group in which you identify as being a part of. The out-group is the group in which you don't belong. As a monoracial person, you may have never had to think about which racial group you belong. But as a biracial person, that's continuous and lifelong. It might be a little bit easier to understand it this way. Let's say that you're a basketball fan, and let's say you're excited, you're about to go to the big game. You walk in, and your excitement quickly turns to nervousness. Your hands begin to sweat, your heart begins to race because you notice that everyone on this side of the arena is wearing green. Everyone on this side of the arena is wearing yellow. And you're wearing purple. You're the outsider, the out-group. You don't fit. How do you decide where you're going to sit? Do you look for a friendly face? Do you wait for an invitation? Do you look for someone who also doesn't look the same? What if this was everyday life? You're the outsider, the out-group. You don't fit. You learn to adjust your lens. You look for ways in which you are similar. In this case, you love basketball. The green team's fans love basketball. The yellow team's fans love basketball. Everyone in the room is a basketball fan. Does it really matter that you're wearing purple in a sea of green and yellow? Can you still enjoy the game wearing a different colored shirt? Earlier this year, I had an opportunity to go to Johannesburg, South Africa. And there I met former ANC President Tambo's son, Dali Tambo. And what he told me is that both Black and white South Africans are beginning to see themselves more and more as one group, South African. He said that they're moving more away, or they're moving further away from identifying as racial groups and as a national identity. Now, keep in mind, I do understand that Dali Tambo is a national figure, and this may be more than a goal than what every South African may believe. But what it tells us is that our group can be fluid. We can identify as being a part of a group with those who look different than us. In Puerto Rican culture, you have both light and dark-skinned Puerto Ricans, but they're one people, Puerto Rican. In mainstream America, biracial people have had a positive impact on diversity and inclusivity. According to Dr. Sarah Gaither, who's a researcher at Duke University, when monoracial people are exposed to biracial people, then colorblindness goes down to lower levels. And while being exposed to biracial people is a great start, it's time that we become intentional with those with whom we interact. It's likely that you work with those who look different than you. Your children probably go to school with those who look different than them. You shop with people who look different than you. You may even live in neighborhoods with those who look different than you. But living, working, shopping in diverse areas is great. It doesn't mean that you'll forge relationships with those who are different. I challenge you to defy your bias. I encourage you to become comfortable being uncomfortable. I challenge you to encourage your children to have interracial friendships. I know this can be scary and it can be anxiety-provoking. I'm not asking you to be like the Lovings or like my parents and marry someone of a different race, but if you do, that's great. What I'm asking is that the next time you walk into a room, Gravitate towards someone who's different than you. Start a simple conversation about things that are typical and simple, such as travel, sports, anything of that nature. Get to know how you're the same. How are you similar? How are you the insider, the in-group? How do you fit? Go eat at a restaurant on the other side of town. Go see a movie or a play about people who are different than you. Read literary works by authors who are different than you. Find out how you're the similar, the same, the insider, the in-group. Invite a colleague to lunch who's different than you. Get to know that person on a personal level. Our country is changing. Biracial and multiracial people are being born at increasing rates. This proves that we can break down fabricated barriers. It's time that we not allow race to keep us from sharing the same space. It can be as easy as where you sit in an audience.